Okay, folks, got a request for a review from Biff Bam Boom Comics, also known as 3B Comics. They have recently released and fulfilled the fifth and sixth comics in their line. This is the fifth comic, INTERSTELLA number 0. And we're going to jump right in and start reviewing this. And the first thing that I see is a problematic page that has the cast of characters as well as their relationships with one another. Now, I've covered up most of this so that you can't see it, and largely that's because it spoils a lot of what's going to be in the book. There's really no reason to have a page like this, especially if you're dealing with a zero issue. Um, why are you trying to explain up front to us what the story we're about to read is supposed to tell us? This is all information that we should be getting from the comic book itself. We should not be getting it handed to us on a plate. It should be coming through in the story, through the dialogue, through the exposition, through the action. Everything should be coming through the story. So this is a page I would have completely done away with. So getting completely into the story, we immediately hit a little bit of a hitch because it starts out by saying, "And out from the heavens a star is born." And you think that that's in reference to what's there on the page. But it's actually not, because Hank McLarren, who is the narrator, says, "Well, at least that's what my mother told me. Hi, I'm Hank McLarren, and this is the story about how my life got turned upside down by the most beautiful woman from another world." So he's actually talking about what's going on the page. And the quote, "And out from the heavens a star is born," is missing quote marks. I mean, that's something, apparently a saying or something, pseudo from the Bible, uh, that his mother told him once upon a time, but it doesn't actually relate to what we're looking at. So there's a little bit of confusion just up front in the writing here. And also, we're missing some punctuation. Hi, comma, I'm Hank McLarren, comma, and this is the story about yada yada. So we've got some punctuation issues up front. We also have a spelling issue or wrong word issue on the next page where it says, "Not too far from my hometown of Celebrity City, just on the outskirts." Not too far, TOO, not TO. Um, One of the things the comic does set up nicely at the beginning is that the character lives in a world full of superheroes and monsters and stuff like that. So this is a traditional Marvel DC kind of universe here, and if they didn't know that there were aliens, they're about to. See, so we have Hank McLarren. Turns out Hank McLarren is a truck driver, and he's dropping off a load in his truck when all of a sudden it goes from the dead of night to midday in seconds, except that's not actually what we see on the page, is it? Even when we have this particular light right up next to him, we can still see the stars. So that's not going from the dead of night to midday. I mean, that's a rhetorical flourish, but it doesn't actually describe what's going on. So that's a little bit of inconsistency there. Now, his truck gets consumed by the light, and but he himself manages to escape and survive unharmed. And at the top of the hill, this glowing light where my truck used to be. Somewhere in here, I think there's missing a verb. And at the top of the hill was this glowing light where my truck used to be. It just that doesn't necessarily flow as it is. Next, we have, "And out of the light a woman appeared with a sound effect, twuck, twuck." Okay. Um, what is that supposed to be? I mean, it. If I were trying to be clever about it, I would say that she's converting the mass of the truck into a body for herself, and in a cutesy poo way, the sound effect sounds like twuck, which sounds like truck. But seriously, come on. This is like playing with it. You know, I mean, this is where you're basically begging your reader not to take your comic book seriously when you have sound effects like that. I mean, because it reminds me honestly of oh gosh, back when Greg Pak was writing Incredible Hercules, or maybe that was Fred Van Lente who was writing Incredible Hercules, and they would have they would have all of these picturesque and artistic sound effects like Bosch and art history, and because they were dealing with all these things that looked like they were in paintings of hell. It was just basically trying to be goofy, and I don't get the feeling like this comic is supposed to be trying to be goofy. But if it is, this is the first serious indication right here. Twuck. My goodness. So anyway, this woman appears, and she's naked and lying on the ground. She laid there peacefully. I believe the word would be she lay there peacefully. Um, and it's also there, THERE. So wow, we're just loading up on spelling, punctuation, and word errors just from the beginning. Hank asks, "Are you okay, miss?" And then he goes immediately to the most important question: "What should I call you?" Okay. Says I moved in closer to quote unquote check up on her. Dude, where is your hand going? Um, and then he calls her Stella for some unknown reason. Next up, she lurches up and kisses him because she, according to Hank, she kissed me to understand my language, but you can believe what you want. Actually, I do not find that very difficult to believe. Why? Because that is the motif used by Starfire of the new Teen Titans back in the 80s to, I think it was, yeah, back in the early 80s, issue number 2, she would kiss Robin to learn English. so so this is actually a motif that has been used in comics before. I don't know if the writer knew that, but there will be some DC fans who are like, "Hey, I recognize this." And so everything was going great until it showed up, and then she asks, "Is something wrong?" Okay, well, yeah, something's wrong. I mean, hold on. He says, "What the hell is that?" And it turns out to be this Minotaur creature, Asterius the Starbreaker. And out of this brush, instead of A-N-D, out of this brush, the monster appeared. Okay, so another error per page, practically. And here's where things kind of get weird because, well, according to the text that I had covered up, the whole point of her being on Earth is to capture this guy. So why is it that she's messing around with this guy and asking, is something wrong, as opposed to doing her damn job? I mean, her job is to find this guy and take him into custody. That's basically her function. That's why she's on Earth in the first place. So why is it that he's having to just stumble across the fact that this monster is there, as opposed to her realizing that, this is her job, this is what she's got to do, and how can maybe he help her find this Minotaur creature who just happens to be standing behind her in a way. And then we get into the more kind of ridiculous, we were ready to take him down. If I'm Hank, I'm ready to shit my pants. I'm not ready to take him down. He's a Minotaur, for God's sake. And Hank already said earlier on that he's not used to this kind of stuff. So why is he saying we were ready to take him down? I mean, she obviously looks primed. So if she was ready to take the Minotaur down, that makes sense. But for Hank to be like, oh yeah, I'm all for this. I don't think so. And then, sure enough, after he rebuffs her first attack, the Minotaur rebuffs her first attack, Hank says, "We need to get out of here." But then he says, he, meaning the Minotaur, was very afraid of us. I could see it in his eyes. What? I mean, what? What? So why are you running away? I don't know. I'm basically going to leave it here because the rest of the issue kind of goes in what you would in a path you would assume. There's not really a whole heck of a lot that's going to surprise you if you're reading this comic. The only other things that I would comment on is the fact that some of the artwork could use a little bit of revision. It took me a while to figure out that the Minotaur here was getting hit in the back of the head with the stick being so bloody blurry that it was almost impossible to see. And then later on, after the fight has concluded, and we have superheroes arriving on the scene to check things out. We have a bit of clunky dialogue and exposition mix up. Basically, we have the one of the superhero characters saying, "But if they ever return, we will be ready." Having missed the whole thing, of course. But up here, we say, well, now that that's over, we can pick back up with, and then now you hit the dialogue, and then my story. Somehow these two should be going together, and this should have been positioned elsewhere, or maybe it should have been said by the dragon so that the dialogue bubble could go somewhere else. But yeah, this breaks between the exposition in a way that it just shouldn't. And then, last but not least, we have Hank after this battle has taken place. And don't forget, he's lost his truck in all this. So he says, about a week later, life was back to normal. Well, what the hell does that mean? You just lost your truck. And if I'm not mistaken, for a truck driver, that's a big deal. And what we find out is that Hank is actually working now at this diner here, or gas station. And you know, I understand that he could certainly probably pick up a gas station job within a week, but that's not necessarily life going back to normal unless he was doing this before. Life has thrown him a severe curveball. He's now lost his truck and he's working in a diner or in this gas station, convenience store, whatever the heck, and that's not back to normal. So yeah, that's kind of a weird evaluation or self-evaluation of what has gone on with him. So I'm going to jump now into the pros and cons, starting with the cons, since a lot of the cons are pretty obvious. We've got spelling errors, we've got punctuation errors, we've got wrong words and missing words. We've also got sparse text. There's a lot of places where dialogue could be occurring, where you could have a little more exposition to explain the interrelationships among the characters and what they're all doing there. This is something that I get into with ISOM #1, where there's a lot of during the fights and in various other situations, there are plenty of places where extra dialogue, extra text could have been placed that would have at least given the reader a little bit of something to do in those sections, but also would have filled in a lot of blanks. And I think that's a problem here in this particular comic as well. Hank is a weird character. That's one of the cons here because #1, one of his first priorities is giving the naked girl a name. It's like why? I mean, I why? and to come up with Stella, I mean, is there a reason for Stella? I mean, that almost seems like it deserves a story in and of itself. Like maybe that was a dog you used to own. But yeah, I mean, when you have a naked girl just appear out of nowhere in a ball of light, giving her a name is probably not high on the list of priorities there. And why does Hank think that the creature is scared of them? I mean, for one thing, that kind of reverses the whole dynamic of the fight. It's more the creature should really be a threat to them as opposed to being scared of them. And then the whole life was back to normal thing. It's just Hank's thought processes are really not on the ball. There's also the problem of unnecessary nudity. You notice that there were a couple of scenes I had to cover up some. And basically, not only is the nudity unnecessary, but it almost always cuts into your sales whenever you are doing a mature reader's book. I've put in a couple of my commentaries now. I think the last one that I did was on cussing in comics. And if you have to give your comic an R rating, if you have to basically say this is for mature readers, you're basically cutting your sales in half. And if you don't really have to do that, then why would you do that? You want your audience to be as broad as it possibly can. So don't throw things like this into your comic if you don't really absolutely need it. And since she comes back later, as you can see on just on the cover of the book, as having a uniform. There's no reason for her not to be uniformed in some way, shape, or form, or at least to have given herself some minimal covering when she, I don't know, converted the truck into energy, whatever it was that she did. So let's go to the prose side now. And the prose, first of all, the art style. I was surprised by this because I was not expecting to like the art style, just judging from the cover and judging from a few items in or judging from some of the interior pages. But it really does grow on you after a while. It almost reminds me of the 1990s computer games and their cutscenes and how they looked kind of animated and real at the same time. I'm not calling this like Alec Ross level style painting by any means, but it's actually not bad. And it's not hard to look at these characters and decipher, what it is that they're doing, as it is sometimes in other comic books that use a more traditional drawing style. Yeah, so it harkens back to the 1990s video game cutscenes. I'm thinking of games like, Harvester and Myst and things like that. It's got a highway to heaven concept behind it because um, it has the potential to become a sci-fi buddy show. And if you don't remember the show Highway to Heaven, it starred Michael Landon and I believe Victor French, was it? And they were Michael Landon played an angel, and Victor French was, kind of his sidekick, who met him and just decided to travel around with him. Because the angel, Michael Landon, was assigned to help people in various places. And so they would drive from town to town and, end up here and there and be just randomly helping out. And you have that potential for this Highway to Heaven motif, where if her job is to apprehend criminals from outer space who have for some reason wound up on Earth, that's a great way to go from town to town, especially since they're not only do they have a romantic potential together, but they're both involved in trucking. You've got because one of them's involved in prisoner transport and the other one just does trucking for a living. And that's one of the interesting things about the core character set itself is that Stella and Hank are both truckers in a sense. And so you kind of wonder, what is the trucker mindset? Trucking is a lifestyle as well as a job. It has to be just because of the nature of it. And so what is it like in the mind of a trucker who goes from town to town to town to town, hauling freight, hauling product, hauling prisoners in some cases? And do you have things like wanderlust? Is that part of the life of a trucker? And it makes you want, and that can set up some interesting conflicts later on. Like, will Stella find Earth interesting enough to satisfy her wanderlust as it is? Maybe Hank's got to prove to her that, if you look at just going to all 50 states in America, it's like going to 50 different planets. And that might entice her to stay because he would want her to stay. Or would she decide to leave? And if she decided to leave, would Hank want to stay on Earth or would he want to go with her? Those are kind of dynamics that can be set up for later storylines. And one other thing that I like about the book is just the world, in the fact that it sets up the superheroes, monsters, and aliens things right away. It establishes the stage with no hullabaloo. It's not trying to hold cards close to its chest and reveal things piecemeal. We know right up front that this is a world where you can encounter I don't know about well, it looks like the supernatural just from the monsters side, but you've got superheroes, you've got monsters, now you've got aliens. This is not, and who knows, maybe they've encountered aliens before. That would be kind of interesting to know up front. Um, so yeah, I mean, when you get to the end of the book, you will wind up finding out all of the stuff that is revealed on this page. But really, all of that should be made apparent through the book, and for the large part, it mostly is. I think there might have been a couple of items here or there where you might think, well, I didn't quite suss out that information from the story itself. And in those cases where you feel like that information didn't come through, then those are also indicators of places where the writing needed to catch up with the rest of the book. I needed to kind of expand and fill in the gaps. So my overall impression of Interstellar Zero is that it's got really, really good core concepts. I mean, it's a book that I would like to see either well executed or even turned into like a TV or Netflix or Amazon Prime series. I mean, that's how strong I feel like the concept is, because the idea of following these two characters around the country as they apprehend alien super criminals and kind of get to know each other, one being a kind of like a U.S. Marshal type character in herself as from outer space, and him being a regular everyday trucker who could you know kind of describe to us what it's like to be on the road, to have a lifestyle where you're on the road constantly. It seems like a really, really interesting combination that could be picked up and parlayed into a really good TV property, or a good comic book property if it's just done well. And that's the big problem with Interstellar, is its execution. You have so many punctuation, spelling, bad, or words missing, wrong words used. You just run into on all these little roadblocks that get in the way of enjoying the book, and also the fact that the writing does not flesh out all of the detail of the story at hand. Um, it's kind of, I would almost, it feels like this is still in a developmental stage where it hasn't had enough time to cook yet. And so I would want, later issues to be more fleshed out. Um, but let me tell you, I mean, it's really good to at least even be releasing this stuff. I mean, you're already miles ahead of most people who have comic book ideas to publish an actual issue, as opposed to just sit around and have the ideas, percolating in your head and never getting out onto the page. So I really credit Biff Bam Boom Comics with making this effort to publish and fulfill Interstellar, because it's better to do something and stumble through it than it is to try and wait until it's perfect and not do it at all. Um, that's about the best I can say here. However, I would like to see some perfecting between Interstellar Zero and Interstellar One, just so that number one, Hank becomes more of a coherent character, because that guy just seems kind of nuts right now. Um, and just to see the general quality of the writing and exposition and dialogue improve, so that it's not just a straightforward fight comic, but it can have more depth to it. So that's going to be my review of Interstellar number zero. And in the next Biff Bam review, I will I will review their sixth offering, which is Cody Valiant. And I'm Mike Partika. Please do subscribe so that when the next Biff Bam Boom review drops, you will be privy to that. And I will talk to you later.